Okay, so next we're gonna go over part 2, streamlining game day. So high performers, in terms of athletes in all arenas, whatever they're doing, have these rituals that they go through. And this is actually true outside of athletics as well, right? If you have someone who's in the military, they're gonna have a certain protocol and like habits that they go through and rituals that they go through before they go out into the field. That could be true for, again, first responders. That could be true for, people who are gonna go public speak. This is also true for athletes, right? So a games athlete, for example, who's been to the game multiple times, they're gonna have all these systems in place of things that, okay, I need to know, where am I getting my meal prep from when I get to Madison, for example. Okay, who is taking care of my gym bag if I set something out on the floor and it's being left there? If I need food, who's gonna make sure that they can get that for me? If I'm testing an in-person workout where it's like in my gym and I get to control the factors because it's a qualifier sometime, okay, who's there counting my reps and being a certified judge? Who's to make sure that the camera is still working for filming? And then who's there making sure that my round times are where I want them and calling out whether I'm ahead or behind my projected pace. They have all these systems that are put in place to make sure that their game day goes as smooth as they possibly can and that they're controlling as many variables as they possibly can. Again, competition is always going to be chaotic. So you need to do something to make sure that you can center yourself, right? Find a quiet place that you can go in between events where just the total level of noise and arousal is lower so that you can actually be calm, right? Hopefully this is something that's maybe air conditioned if you're in a hot environment or heated if you're in a cold environment. Again, all these things are gonna be really important. I think there's things as simple as like, are you gonna bring your own chair to the competition? Because oftentimes it's just like, a concrete floor and you're gonna be sitting there on the floor the entire day, which is probably something that you're not used to unless you have brought a chair, right? So there's little things like that. Make sure that you have ability to get hot and cold food, hot and cold drinks, whatever you need, again, relative to the environment to elicit your best game day. And all of that stuff needs to be prepared, not just like the day of, that needs to be prepared weeks in advance. And hopefully you know the systems well, far enough in advance where, again, it helps reduce your anxiety as well if we go back to the first part. So all these things are about streamlining your game day. Let's talk point number 1, shop and prep food and drink. So obviously staying fueled is extremely important and staying hydrated is extremely important. This would sort of be the process that I would run down through if I was a coach recommending these things to an athlete. And certainly if you have a coach who's designated to nutrition, they should really be able to help you with this stuff. But again, even if your coach isn't necessarily a nutrition specialist, they should be able to at least, point you to things, avoid this, stick to that sort of stuff. Okay, step number 1. This is just to compile a list of easily digestible ingredients that you actually like, you tolerate well, and that are gonna be palpable to you on game day. So for myself, it might be like bananas, peanut butter and jelly, fruit snacks, just like carbs, sugary things, some protein, kind of minimizing your level of fat intake during the day. However, for me, I'll typically wake up and maybe have some toast, maybe I may say 2 eggs because I don't want to have too much fat in there. Basically just a more hearty, typical breakfast because that works for me. Other people are like, I could never do that. It's like oatmeal with very little other things in it. Again, so this is something where as you get more experience, you're going to get more exposure to things that that will work well for you and that you'll tolerate well in competition. Again, a simple way to experiment that would be, okay, I have an AM session today in my training. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to experiment with this food, see how long it takes for me to feel good with these quantities. All that kind of stuff is just, things that you'll get experience with. So after you've compiled a list of foods that you tolerate well, next is to place those items and the quantities that you project to eat those foods into time slots based on the events and those event times. That's sort of a mouthful. Let's kind of run through it. So basically, lay out your projected, again, this could all get thrown away and that's fine. You'll have to adjust on the fly, but projected start times for events, projected as to what those events could be, right? Again, not every single event, all the events ahead of time. Sometimes they're announced right as you're, actually getting ready to go do the event, but oftentimes they're released beforehand, or at least some of them are released beforehand. So for example, if it's a Fran type event, you're not going to eat a bunch of eggs or something and then go out and do Fran because you're just gonna leave the eggs on the floor. But again, so that's the sort of thing that you can think about. Like it's, I have a really long event. I want to make sure I get some carbs that are pretty easily digestible so they kind of stick with me through the event. Or, okay, this is like a heavier lifting event, so I know that I have another really lactic event after that. So I'm going to get more food in now, maybe just a little bit of drink in between those two events. And that way, when I hit that really lactic event, my stomach's a little bit more empty. Again, so you're putting in the events that you're doing, the times that you might be doing those at, and then where you can kind of fit the correct amount of food in there to maximize your food intake, to appropriately maximize your fluid intake, and to make sure you're actually feeling good and staying fueled throughout the day. It would be a huge mistake not to eat enough, again, relative to maybe a normal training day. I think that happens a lot with people. Step 3 would then be to take that schedule that you have and basically go through and double check the macronutrients to make sure they're sort of in bounds. So what I mean is you don't want a ton of fat throughout the day. Again, because that's just gonna sit in your gut. It's not gonna give you that immediate energy that you need. So you wanna favor mainly carbs, some protein, and a little bit of fat. Again, so look at that. Again, that could be a different breakdown than you would have on just a normal training day. I would say it probably would be. Also, you wanna stay away from certain things that would be considered healthy on game day. That would be, again, if you're kind of nervous, they're not gonna digest nearly as well. So they're not easily digestible foods. So even though broccoli is a great food, right, you're not gonna have that maybe in the middle of your competition day. That would probably be a pretty poor idea. From that, you're then gonna create a shopping list and also add in potential substitutions because again, you don't know exactly how this is gonna go. Maybe that you think that you really like peanut butter and jelly and you look at that after your second event and you're like, I don't wanna eat that. You need to have something as backup in case, right? So have substitutions available and then actually go shopping off that list and then actually test your plan onto a simulation or at least like a hard training day where you can sort of get the feel of how that's gonna go for you and then make adjustments accordingly before you actually go into the event. And again, I would say, ideally you're actually working with a coach as you go through that process. So that's food prep. Again, there's a lot more that we could go into that. The Fitness Move It episode number 7, I believe I did CrossFit competition nutrition. That would be another really good resource to check out. 2, pack your gym bag early. So this is one of the most simple things that you can do that you should be doing well in advance. So I have a packing list down below here. I'm not going to go through every single item. There's things that, kind of categories of thing. Make sure you have all the stuff that you need to be able to do your sport. Like don't forget your jump rope at home. But even just like simple things that you might have not thought about, like bring your own chalk, because if the venue doesn't have chalk out on the floor, that's a huge competitive advantage. If you can bring your own chalk onto the floor and no one else has chalk and you have chalk, that's awesome, right? So like little things like that are gonna be extremely helpful. Again, just run through that list to kind of, think about it. Think about what recovery modalities you would want along. Are you gonna bring a stim unit, a percussion gun, like all that kind of stuff, those little toys that you like to use. And again, that stuff can just help, if nothing else, keep you occupied and kind of engaged in what you're doing. Again, hopefully action stays higher, anxiety stays a little bit lower as a result. And then lastly, you wanna think about food and drink to make sure that you're keeping your hot stuff hot and your cold stuff cold. Again, if you're in a really hot environment, it's summertime, it's July in the Northern Hemisphere, and it's just really hot. You're at Madison, you're getting ready to compete or something, and it's on the turf and it's like 100 degrees. When you come back into that athlete area, you're gonna wanna make sure that you can get cool fluid into your body, right? If you just have a water bottle sitting there, it's room temperature, that's not gonna aid in cooling you down at all. You wanna have a cooler or thermoses that are keeping things cold or potentially hot to make sure that, that's actually what you want. And then lastly, I would say, this is one of the things that I started incorporating recently, is just bringing along a bunch of different water bottles, or it could just be like a big thermos or something, but stuff to mix them in, and then having prepackaged supplements of whatever you want, right? So one of the things, I don't rely heavily on supplements in my day-to-day training, but I do more supplementation of the things that I already do and the things that I know that I tolerate well. I will do more of those things on game day. So for example, like BCAAs, protein powder, Gatorade, like the basics. Again, just because it's mainly easily digestible carbs and protein, and it's palpable, so I drink more of it. I probably will add a little bit of salt in there as well, that kind of stuff. Again, these are all things that I've done multiple times, so I can say that like those are going to work for me, and then I'm not really changing anything when I actually get to game day. So anyway, I have these prepackaged little like Ziploc bags basically, or you can put them in little Tupperware containers, things like that, where you can just basically pour it into your drink, and it's already pre-packaged, so you don't have to waste any time like scooping it out in the, between events or something, right? It's already there. You just pour it in, it's a certain amount, and you're good to go. Lastly, I would say make sure you're doing things that are actually purified, clean in terms of like purity certified supplements, right? So make sure that they're in a facility that's clean, make sure they're certified. Off the top of my head, I don't know all the organizations that will approve that kind of stuff, but make sure you go check it out, make sure they're on the list that they need to be on so that they're not tainted supplements. Again, if drug testing is something that you're gonna have to worry about. 3, again, if this is a qualifier, you're gonna have to video your events. So one of the things that is a headache constantly is making sure that this process goes smoothly, where nothing goes wrong with it, and you're forced to redo an event. That's the last thing that you wanna do. Number 1 is practicing using a mobile app on your phone to actually record. So things like WODproof or WeTime, where it's a built-in clock onto your screen, and making sure that actually works correctly, saves correctly, you can upload from there, all that stuff. 2 is to clear storage off your phone, right? Delete a bunch of training videos, basically photos that you don't need, apps that you don't use currently, right? Make sure that you have enough free storage where you can record multiple events over, however many events you need, right? If it's 5 events plus some redos over quarterfinals, make sure that you have enough where you can actually record 7 events with like long metcons and things, which could be a lot of storage. Make sure you have enough storage to do that. And then put your phone on airplane mode and do not disturb. Again, there's nothing worse than you being in the middle of a metcon and you get a phone call and it interrupts your video recording. So make sure you do that. Next would be to consider getting like a tripod for your phone, because it's really hard to try to set up your phone and you drop a weight and your phone falls down. And now it's like you're out of frame and you have to redo it because it's an invalid video. So make sure that you have the systems in place. I linked to a tripod, nothing special about it, but basically just like understand that like the easier you can make this for yourself, where it's like, okay, I set this up, I'm in frame, you can see everything, you're good to go, just makes your life a lot easier. I would also say do the rehearsal round that you plan on doing, just like, a quick few movements of a few reps of each of the movements, and kind of go around, move the way you plan on moving, transition play the way you plan on transitioning, and then watch it back on your phone to make sure that you're staying in frame the entire time. The last thing you want to do is realize that the back of your legs are out of frame and your toes to bar, and it's like, oh, you can see it, but not really. I'm sort of out of frame, and then you have to redo again, right? Or risk getting a penalty. Lastly, I would say this is something that I didn't think about last year, and this is something that I definitely need to think about this year, is practice uploading to YouTube from wherever you plan on spending your time during the quarterfinals. So for me, I traveled about 2 hours to do my quarterfinals test. What that means is that I couldn't go back to my house to upload, therefore I wasn't on Wi-Fi. Or the gym I was actually testing at didn't have 15-foot rope, so I went over to the other gym to test and do a 15-foot rope climb, and as a result, we were traveling back to our other gym to do the rest of the tests, and I was uploading over data to try to do it, and it took 2 hours, and I barely uploaded within the time window. So this is something, if you realize that your gym's Wi-Fi is inconsistent or you're not on it, it's password protected, all that kind of stuff is stuff to set up beforehand to make sure that it actually works correctly and that you're not running into roadblocks in terms of being able to upload your videos on time within the windows. Again, some of those windows is the same, quarterfinals types thing as last year in 2021. It's gonna be extremely important that you can figure that stuff out. And then lastly, number 4 is to complete a competition simulation. So in preparation for the 2022 quarterfinals, we did a simulation. I linked to that below this video. You can check that out. It was 5 events over the course of 2 days for those athletes. And that's the sort of thing that you can, again, start to experiment and streamline your game day around this. So it's basically like rehearsal, where you don't just practice working out hard, but you also get to practice all the habits and things that are supporting that game day performance throughout the lead up to that event, throughout the event, and then also like going after it as well. So be sure to do something along those lines, again, if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of competition experience around that sort of thing. So stick around, we're gonna go over part 3 next.